Hi, this is a video relating to the first chapter of Wheelock's Latin, and chapter 1 basically hits the ground running with the basic verb. And I want to give you a quick teaser for that chapter, and then you can of course go on and read that chapter in its entirety. But one nice thing about Latin, I like Greek, I like Hebrew, I'm sure I would like Arabic if I'd ever finished going through the grammar. But one thing about Hebrew and Arabic is that the font, that is the script, the writing is different. It can be a barrier that takes some getting over. Even with Greek, Greek is a little bit closer, but it's still a little foreign. I personally have always found Latin much more, comfortable, simply because the letters are the same. Now you do have long marks in Latin, macrons, they're the line over an A or an O and so forth. Those are actually, can be significant, although for the kind of course in Latin that I teach, those aren't quite as important. The purist, if you're going to go on and become a scholar, you might want to learn them. The classical texts themselves won't have them. They're more for learning, and then you don't see them anymore. There are some slight differences. The Latin alphabet doesn't have a J. I will have to serve in those places, as you might remember from Indiana Jones. Although I think it slightly gets it wrong in the way it presents it. But mostly the Latin letters are the same as the letters we use in English. So that's a perk to Latin. You can read the introductory material in Wheelock if you want, but let's hit the ground running with Chapter 1 of Wheelock. The first thing you should know about Latin, the biggest difference between Latin and English, I suppose, is that it's an inflected language. In English, we know who does what by the order of the word. So in the sentence, Ken hit the ball, that's quite different from the sentence, the ball hit Ken. And the reason is because of the order that the words come in. Latin isn't like that so much. I mean, there is a kind of a standard order of words in Latin. It's not the same as English. Of course, if this is the first language outside of English you're learning, you need to quickly learn that there is no one word-to-word correspondence from one language to another. I read the Odyssey in high school, and I, of course, read it in whatever version they gave me in the high school. And tell me, O Muse, of that great hero, or however it went in the Odyssey. And then I asked for Christmas for a copy of the Odyssey, and my sister got me one. And I don't think I led on, but I was a little disappointed because it read differently. And my initial thought was, well, this isn't the Odyssey. Why is it worded differently? That's because I was young and had never studied really any other language. There is not just one way to go from one language to another. Languages do things differently. There is no one translation of the Bible, for example, that can be the translation. And so what you'll find is that languages do things differently. And the standard word order of Latin is not the standard word order of English. But even so, the word order really doesn't matter as much in Latin. It's kind of like a pilot. If you're going to be a pilot for very long, you need to learn how to fly by the instruments. When you can't see the land or when you're in a cloud, you need to be able to know how your plane is oriented by looking at the instruments on the panel. And in the same way, Latin modifies the endings of its words in ways that tell you where you're flying, where the word goes in the sentence. We actually do this a little bit in English, but of course if you're a native English speaker, you probably haven't noticed. So for example, I walk, you walk, we walk, y'all walk, they walk, but he walks, she walks, it walks. We add an S in what is called in grammar speak the third person singular, when it's a he, she, or an it that is doing the walking. Tom walks. The dog walks. Susie walks. Whenever the subject of a English verb is a he, she, or it may modify that ending. And of course we also make strange changes like foot to feet and so forth. So English does modify the shape of its words a little bit, but Latin just does this big time. Greek does this, big time. Hebrew, it's like somebody's blown up a word and you have to figure out where all the pieces went. So Latin, what the biggest difference between English and Latin is that it's an inflected language. It's the endings on the words that tell you where the pieces go in English, not so much the order that the words come in. So, for example, take laudo, and I've gone ahead and put the long mark there, the macron. Laudo doesn't just mean praise. Laudo means I praise, because that O, that long O at the end of laudo is a hint that this word is first person singular. I'll explain a little bit later what first person singular is. For now, I'll just say that it's I. And so that the word I actually jumps out of the long O at the end of laudo. And so laudo doesn't just mean praise. Laudo means specifically I praise. Same thing with laudas. That long AS at the end means that the subject is a you. Laudas should be translated as you praise. And not just any you. Not just, am I speaking to one you, or am I talking about a lot of people that are you, y'all? It's one you. That long AS ending means that it's a singular you. Second person singular is what we say. And that's later in the video. You singular, one you praises, you praise. So what you'll find is that the endings on Latin verbs change the point of view. They change what we call in grammar the person. You've heard me talk about first person, second person. There is a third person. So changing the endings on the verb can change the point of view, can change the person who's talking, basically. Well, let's give some examples here. This is called a conjugation of laudo. What that means is that I'm showing you all the different forms of a particular group of laudo forms, so to speak. So I've already mentioned that laudo means I praise, and I've mentioned that laudas means you, one you, you praise. Laudat is the third person singular. It means that a he, a she, or an it praises. Not all three. That would be a conglomeration, wouldn't it? Laudat means that the subject is a he, like Tom praises, or a she, like Sophie praises, or an it, like the tree praises. Basically, laudat means that a he, or a she, or an it is doing the praising. So that's called the third person singular. Laudamus means we praise. Laudatus means y'all praise, or a plural you praise. And then laudant means they praise. And of course it could be the Red Sox praise, it could be the Americans praise, it could be the Republicans praise. It's going to be some they. And of course if you don't know what the specific they is, you just translate it as they praise. So you can see this is what I mean when I say that Latin is an inflected language. I mean to say that it changes the endings of its words, and that it is primarily by those changed endings. The ending on a word is really what tells you what's going on, far more than the order of the words as in English. These are the endings you might want to memorize if you're going to be a Latin aficionado. Long O is the ending that tells us that the subject is an I. Long AS tells you that the subject is a you singular. The T tells you that the subject is actually it's not just long AS, but the S in particular tells you that the subject is a singular you. The T tells you that the subject is a he, a she, or an it. The mus, M-U-S, tells you that the subject is a we. The tis, T-I-S, tells you that the subject is a y'all, or a you plural. And then the NT tells you that the subject is a they. So O-S-T, M-U-S-T-I-S-N-T, O-S-T, M-U-S-T-I-S-N-T. That's just a quick way to capture in one foul swoop, the entire set of basic verb endings. There will be lots of endings. If you go the whole distance and memorize all of it, there's plenty of endings to learn, but this is the first set of endings to learn. O-S-T, M-U-S, T-I-S-N-T. Now, again, this is implicit in what I've been saying, but let me break it down here. These components can be broken up into a stem. The stem in this case is loud, the root of it, so to speak, and an ending, like the long O. Loud O, like you're bringing two train cars together. Now, I should warn you that the A in most of these, like the A in os, ot, amos, otis, ont, isn't really part of the ending, and I guess we could call it part of the stem, I guess. It's kind of in between. It's kind of like the cartilage that keeps the bones, from rubbing together. That's a connecting vowel. You could think of it as part of the stem, but sailor take warning. Let me move on. Okay, so what are the components of a verb? What are the elements, the different meaning bits of a verb? Well, first of all, a verb, here's an aspect of a Latin verb. It's going to have number. So you have singular verbs and you have plural ones. I could have, this previous chart, you'll notice that the top three are the top three here are the singulars, and the bottom three are the plurals. A lot of times they'll be put side by side. So you'll have the singulars here, and then next to them you'll have the plurals. I believe it's that way in Wheelock. I've done it like this, for convenience in making a quick PowerPoint. So singular and plural are the two different options for the number of a verb. Is it talking about a I, or is it talking about a we? Is it talking about a you singular, or is it talking about a y'all plural? Is it a singular he, she, or it, or is it a plural they? That all has to do with number, whether it's one or more than one. Person, I've been kind of sliding you into the concept of person there are three persons in verbs. The first person has to do with the people doing the speaking. So I am speaking. I am singular. But we can be speaking too, and we is plural. So you see how I is one, I is a one we, and we is a plural I, so to speak. That's first person from the point of view of the speaker. You are who I'm talking to. I'm talking to you. And I could be talking to one you, or I could be talking to more than one you. That's the second person. And then we can talk about someone. We can talk about he, we can talk about she, we can talk about it, we can talk about they in the plural. So I am the one speaking, first person. You are the one I'm speaking to, second person. And she is the one we're speaking about. That's the third person. So that's another dimension of verbs. Tense, verb tense is something you might know from English. In English we talk about present, past, and future. It'll be a little bit more complicated than that in Latin, but that'll get us going. So right now we're just looking at the present tense. There's something called voice, and I don't know who came up with this, but I guess we're stuck with it. Voice has to do with whether the subject is doing the verb or whether the subject is being done by the verb. So Ken hits ball, that's an active verb because Ken is the one doing the hitting. But if I say Ken is hit by the ball, then I've made it into a passive verb, is hit. And Ken is being done by the verb, so to speak. So that's something, again, all of the examples in this video are active. And then there is mood, which is something we won't worry about for a very, very long time. Who knows, maybe never. Actually, I take it back. We do learn about commands in Wheelock chapter 1. Usually, when you learn a language like Latin, you'll learn the indicative mood first. Indicative simply means it's the indicating mood, where you're talking about things factually. So you're saying, there is a table, he walked to the store. You're just making statements. That's the indicative mood. But we do have in this chapter also the imperative mood, and the imperative mood has to do with making commands. There are some other options that are a long way off that I won't tell you. So that's kind of the different key aspects of a verb. Okay, verbs are grouped into conjugations. Now, if you have a photographic memory, you might remember that I called the laudo, laudas, laudat, laudamus, laudatus, laudant. I called that a conjugation in terms of conjugating a verb. That's one way that this word conjugation, it's a 50-cent word, one of the ways that's used. However, now I'm going to use that word in another sense. Someone, a long time ago, some very boring Roman, said, hey, let's divide up all of our verbs into categories. Actually, they didn't. The grammars are grammars are a post-ancient world invention. But anyway, grammarians of the Latin language have divided Latin verbs into 4 conjugations. And in this lesson, wow, the first day of Latin, I'm going to learn the first 2 conjugations. I'm going to learn half the conjugations the first day. Wow, what about that? You can tell which conjugation a verb belongs in largely from its infinitive. Now, there's a lot of grammar review here. Do you remember this from high school, long ago, faraway place? What is the infinitive of a verb? Well, basically, an infinitive is the word to plus the verb. In English it is. Most other languages don't actually use another word with their infinitive. Like take Spanish, hablar, to speak. English is kind of strange for having it be to speak. Spanish people just say hablar. They don't say hablar, to speak. They just say hablar. And hablar all by itself means to speak. Most languages are that way. In fact, I'm not even sure I could come up with another language that for its infinitive, brought out a second word like to. But anyway, so laudare with a re ending is the way that you say to praise. To dream the impossible dream. That's an infinitive. To dream. To fight that's an infinitive. So laudare is an infinitive. It means to praise. Basically, it is put an re on the end of the stem. If you consider that long A part of the stem, remember I've been waffling on whether it is or not. That long A is actually what tells you that it is an infinitive. That it's first conjugation. Pardon. The long A tells you that laudare belongs to the first conjugation, which fits, right? A is the first letter of the alphabet, so why wouldn't the first conjugation begin with an A, right? So you can tell from the infinitive laudare that the verb laudo belongs to the first conjugation. Now, by the way, in your vocabulary, and I probably should have put this in this video, but I didn't. I mean, you have to have something to read the chapter for, right? The vocabulary in Wheelock gives you 4 forms of the verb when it gives you vocabulary. The first one is laudo, the second is laudare, and then there are a couple other ones, laudavi, laudatum. What's up with that? Well, basically, if you think of a car company that only has 4 different models of car, and you can have accessories on those models, so you can have it with a stereo and without a stereo, or you can have it with special wheels or without special wheels, or you can have it with a DVD or without a DVD, but those are all variations on only 4 models of car, that the company puts out. Well, Latin verbs there are changes that I've talked about how they do stuff with endings, they do all kinds of stuff. But there are only 4 basic chassis that Latin works with. It has a present tense chassis, it has the infinitive chassis, and then it has 2 other ones. And so even in this first lesson, we've learned the present tense chassis and the infinitive chassis, the basic form that it puts all its stuff on. The accessories go onto it, but the basic chassis, the basic model. And so the reason why Wheelock gives you all 4 is because I think he thought it would be a bit too much later on when you finally got to those chapters to have to go back and add all that knowledge onto those words. I mean, you'd have to do all the vocabulary over again, adding the laudavi form, and then later adding the laudatum form. So he's basically put all 4 forms in the vocabulary from the first chapter, with a kind of, if you memorize all 4 of these now, it'll pay off later kind of sentiment. So that's why there are 4 forms in the vocabulary. I'm not necessarily worried about you memorizing them all now, but I want you to know that there's something coming down the pike later on, and you might want to go back at that point and look at these vocabulary words again and say, I can see where that came from. Okay, so laudare goes in the first of 4 groups of Latin verbs, and the reason it goes in that first group, that conjugation, the first conjugation, is because its stem has a long A in the infinitive. Does it make sense? I'll take questions if it doesn't. Now, I mentioned that chapter 1 also goes into the imperative, how to make a command in Latin. And basically, to make a command, if you want to command one person to praise, hey, you there, praise me, then you're going to take that RE of the infinitive, take it off, and the lauda all by itself means, hey, you, praise me, praise. I'm doing pop-up. When I point to you, praise, praise, praise. That would be lauda, lauda, lauda. That's a command to one person to praise. And basically, so the second person singular command, the you singular command, is simply taking the RE off of the infinitive, and you've got a command. Now, if you take that command and you put a TE on the end of it, laudate, then you've got a everybody. When I go like this, y'all praise, praise, and everybody praises. That's a command. Laudate, and of course, as you go through Wheelock, you might remember some church literature, church music. You may have heard at some point. I'm trying to think of a te on a. Maybe I'll think of one after I've done this video when it's too late to help you. But you might just say, is there a Christmas song? Gloria in excelsis Deo et in terra oxymeus voluntatis. I can't even think of it. Okay, I'm going to move on in the interest of economy of time. Now, there is a second group of verbs, like I said, that he mentions, the second conjugation, and it pretty much works exactly the same as the first group, except instead of having a long A in the infinitive, it has a long E in the infinitive. So monere means to warn. Admonish is an English word. You'll find all kinds of English words that come. Laudatory is somebody who praises. Is something that's praising. Loud applaud. Is that right? I'm not sure that actually comes from loud. But anyway, you should be able to come up with derivatives. And if I remember correctly, Wheelock gives you some derivatives of these words. This will help you with your English vocabulary if you're studying for the SAT, which chances are, if you're watching this video, you took a very, very long time ago. But anyway, so I'm going to let Wheelock take over from here. See Wheelock to see how the second conjugation, the long E conjugation, puts endings. It's going to be the same. Moneo, monet, mones, moneo, I warn, mones, you singular warn, monet, he, she, or it warns. Monemus, we warn. Monetus, y'all warn. Or monent, they warn. But you can look that up in Wheelock. And I believe that does it for now. For Wheelock, Chapter 1, a teaser.